All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Kim, if you don't mind, just keep letting folks in if they show up.
I will do that.
I'll get us moving. All right, y'all, welcome. Glad to have you all here with us today. Some of you may have joined us 2 weeks ago for our first part of the series, which was focused on family. Today, we're going to be doing part 2 of our 4-part series, and we're going to be focusing on friendships. I'm Rhonda Henry. I'm one of the therapists with the Health and Wellness Program here at UK. I'm joined by my colleague, Kim Relaford, who is also a therapist in our program. She's going to be taking over about halfway through, so you're going to get to hear from both of us today. And you'll have all of our contact information and things at the end of the program as well. Looking at our agenda for a moment here, this is kind of what we're going to be talking about and trying to cover. We got a lot of information packed into this hour. This is a really important topic, and we want to be sure we get as much in as we can. So in addition to kind of the overview agenda, just a couple of things I wanted to mention. You are going to receive the slides from today's program, so you will get an email. That'll probably be tomorrow, in all honesty, when you will get an email with a PDF with the slides in it, and it'll have all the links that are active so that you can access the information we're going to be sharing. You'll hear Kim and I reference a resource page at the end of the program. So there is one page with all the links. So if you're wanting to explore some of these things we reference in a little more detail, we've got those links in place and you'll be receiving that directly. Within the chat, feel free to put any comments or questions in the chat. We've got a lot of information packed in today, so I don't know that we're going to have a lot of time for questions in that way. But one thing that the questions are really helpful for, one, if we have time, we'll definitely try to touch on them. And then two, this is an ongoing series, and we may be doing another round of this later in the year. So we really want to grow this and really tailor it toward what people are interested in. So if there's other feedback you can give, we would love to have that just as we continue to kind of grow the program. Also, we will be recording today's program, and that recording will be posted online. So you will have access to it and can share that or go back to it if you want to see that again down the road. Kim, any other business stuff that I left out there that we need to mention? Are we good?
No, I think that was. Do you want them to put their names in the chat box? Did you say
Let's
that?
yeah, let's go ahead and do that. If folks don't mind to put your name in the chat, we just have to do attendance, and so that helps us, so we aren't scrambling trying to make sure we get everybody who was logged in. But if you don't mind to put your name in the chat box, that would be lovely. And I'm going to move on into our next piece of content. All right, so one that we've used to talk about sort of our relationships and kind of who we want to be within our relationships is this concept of North Star. So when we're talking about North Star as just a general concept, it's that fixed spot in the world that if we can see that North Star, we can navigate, we can find our way, we can get kind of grounded about where we are in the world. And I think about, for this conversation, we want to metaphorically think about that North Star as our personal kind of vision or mission statement, what keeps us on track, what we're about. I think in terms of in friendships in particular, it can be helpful to have this as a way of staying grounded in who we want to be as friends. So sometimes this may feel aspirational. At my best, this is who I am. This is my North Star. I'm a person who's patient, or I'm generous, or I like, to have diversity in the people that I know. At my best, this might be what that looks like. I may not always be able to function in the day to day at my ideal North Star point, but it gives me something to come back to and it gives me something to work toward in that aspirational way. It helps kind of keep us on track. And I also think it really helps us navigate when we're struggling, when we're having difficulty in friendships. And we'll be talking about that as the hour goes along. Some of the questions that I think can help us kind of explore this concept of what is our North Star? Who are we at our core when it comes to these friendships? Is to look at questions like these. So these 5 that are here are ones that I've used with clients that I've worked with in terms of exploring friendship. If this kind of resonates with you, if you're really wanting to sort of invest in this piece, I think this might be a place to explore these questions a little bit, journal, think these through a little bit, and using some of the answers from this to kind of think about what that path needs to look like and what friendship needs to look like going forward. So let's talk about this concept of core values in our friendships and how that kind of fits together. There we go. So, core values or any of our values are those sort of beliefs that motivate us to do what we do. So, we've all got these core values that are in there. Most of us have done activities, in professional development or maybe when we were in school to kind of explore that a little bit. If you've not done that in a while, I think this might be a space to kind of come back to as one of the ways of thinking about friendship and what you want more of or less of kind of in your life, and how these values might be impacting friendships and relationships. I think as an overview, we all know that it's normal, logically, we know that it's normal to have differences of opinion. We're going to have differences in personality. To be close to someone, we don't have to be in perfect alignment in how we see all things. But when we start seeing kind of persistent conflict come up, or persistent issues that we just can't quite get past or can't get resolved, sometimes we might be experiencing a difference in a conflict within those core values. I think it's easy when we look at that sample list on the left. I know I look at that and I think, well, those are all good things. Those are all ideal things. Even if I did the activity and picked out some of my top ones, like these are all good things. How could these be in conflict or cause problems? And I think sometimes it's helpful maybe to think of that through an example. If someone is coming from a place, maybe you've got a friend who's consistently, inviting you out to go out to eat or go have drinks or get together with some other mutual friends. And maybe they're kind of coming from that place of kind of inclusiveness or playfulness, or they're really wanting that social piece that's really important to them. And that might be important to you, but maybe you're in a space where you're really focused on achievement, or you've gone back to school, or you're doing something else that is helping move you forward in some other parts of life. Maybe money is a concern, or some of those issues are coming up. And it starts kind of showing up, this kind of conflict in values starts showing up as you're getting invitations and you're having to turn them down. A friend's feelings are getting hurt because you're not able to spend the money or take the time to go out and eat or do those things. So I think being able to explore a little bit about what those values look like, how they're showing up in our lives, it can be a better way or a more effective way of understanding ourselves and what's important, and really looking to see whether, again, those conflicts are bigger than just our schedules aren't lining up, but maybe there's some bigger underlying stuff that we need to sort of look at or pay attention to. I think this can especially show up if we start seeing sort of themes, again, consistent problems that are showing up, or themes of problems that are showing up, maybe among, over time within a friendship. I think if that resonates for you, if you feel like that's something you like to explore, there's a core values activity in that resource page I mentioned. I think that can be a really good place to start kind of exploring that piece, both for better self understanding, but also to see how that plays out in relationships. When we're looking at building friendships, that can feel like a big lift sometimes. We get a lot of folks who come in to see us for individual therapy who will talk about struggling in this area. They want more friends, and that can kind of come from a lot of different reasons. So we have a whole lot of folks who move here for jobs. I'm sure you all know folks like in that situation just like we do. They move here for jobs, they don't know anyone here, and trying to sort of build that friendship network when you move to a new town or you're starting in a new workplace can feel really big. Sometimes, though, it also comes from things like just changes in life chapters. Maybe you're an empty nester, or maybe you've graduated school and you're in your, kind of first big professional job, and you're in that chapter of life. And maybe you really want some other folks who are also building their career or figuring those kind of starter things out early in their career. So being able to look at different things that are going on for us and recognizing that sometimes those circumstances make it so that we feel like, again, we're lacking the friends we need, or though that's just not kind of meeting the need that's there at the moment. So I think there's a couple of different ways that we can approach building friendships. And I've divided this into sort of three categories just for the purposes of our conversation today. So one piece or one approach to that is going to be broadening our circle. So, we've all got some amount of circle that's going to have our family, our friends, our colleagues, all of our close people in it. How do we kind of broaden that circle? How do we bring more people into our circle? So we might look for, those the kind of low hanging fruit, people with common interests, things that we're doing common things that are similar, and that might be an easy way to get to know somebody or break that ice. We'll get into how to do that in a minute. We also, I think it can also be helpful to notice where other people are seeking friendship. So we aren't, sometimes I'll hear from folks, they feel like, I'm intruding. If I'm trying to go and become friends with someone, well, they've already got their friend group, or they've already got a full plate. They're not looking for more people in their life. And so sometimes it can be helpful to kind of navigate that part of it, to look for folks who are also looking and in spaces looking for friendship. So sometimes, and we'll talk about this in a couple of slides, but sometimes there's online groups or there's different places where people are actively seeking friendship. So at least we all know we're all on the same page. We're all looking for kind of the same piece in our life. And also looking for folks in kind of the similar life chapters. And I reference that a lot throughout this program. Excuse me, but I think with friendships in particular, what life chapter we're in, what's kind of going on, what challenges we're facing, whether that's we're in school, we're dating or getting married, we have kids, we're caregiving, we're traveling, we're in our career, whatever those things are. Being aware of what life chapter we're in and where other folks are, I think definitely can get us lined up and on the same page to sort of build out that friend circle a little bit more. Another approach is the idea of deepening connection. So, looking at relationships that we already have in our circle, and then how do we take those to that kind of next deeper level? So, sometimes that's going to mean things like setting aside or prioritizing time, having a set time. Maybe you got a really good friend and they're in town and you've got access to each other, but your schedules are crazy or it's hard to make that time. So, really pinpointing a way or a time you're going to come together. I think it can be really helpful to be pretty clear and overt. If you're trying to kind of deepen that connection, letting the other person know what's going on. If you've not been in touch for a while, or if it's something where you're saying, yeah, I'm really looking to expand my friend circle. I'm looking to prioritize friendship. Would you be interested in getting together more regularly? Would you be interested in, going for walks on Saturday mornings, looking at those things that are common, kind of natural overlap? Reaching out to people you've lost touch with. Again, that happens because of a lot of life chapter things. Maybe you were in a really demanding place in your job for, a couple of years and you lost touch with some friends. Maybe this is a time to kind of re-engage and even just kind of being vulnerable and owning that. I was in a really crazy life chapter for a while. I've been missing you all. I've been thinking about friendship. I really want to bring that back in. Is that something you'd be open to? And I know that like there's vulnerability in all of this, you all, and like I recognize that. I mean, these are prompts to kind of put ourselves out there, to ask for what we need, and that can feel scary sometimes. But a theme that you will hear, I think, through all four parts of this program is that vulnerability is where we got connection. Being able and willing to step up and open up some vulnerability doesn't mean we've got to throw all boundaries to the wind or throw all things wide open, but some vulnerability is where we've got that potential to then build connection on the other side of that. We also can approach this with through the idea of transforming relationships. So taking relationships that already exist in our circle, but maybe looking to put kind of encourage them more toward friendship to kind of build them in that direction. So that might be things like work friends. One of my dearest friends in this world, a 30-year friendship, we worked together for about 5 years when we were about 23 years old. And we made a decision and we put some work into how are we going to transition that away from just being a work friend. We got different jobs, we went different areas in different directions. How do we transform that into friendship that is deeper and not just about one aspect of our life that might be, again, that low hanging fruit that's kind of easy to share? How do we build that into a little bit more? So again, I think being authentic and open. I'm looking to build more friendship. I love hanging out and seeing you at work. Can we have a no work talk dinner? Can we do a no work talk lunch and try to make that leap over into transforming into just social friendship? Looking at friends of friends, or maybe people again in the outer edges of your circle that you want to get to know better, making those invitations for some of those folks, and obviously looking at common interest acquaintances. So, if you find yourself at the dog park all the time and you see the same kind of little small group of folks wandering around the dog park, maybe that's a good space to approach them or make that ask, would you like to get together, hang out, do something together with our dogs, but using that common interest as the jumping off point. Think when we're looking at expanding our circle, and I'm not going to go through these in quite the same way, but these expanding our circle can feel a little intimidating sometimes. I think it can be a little difficult to think about. Okay, I'm going to gear up. I'm going to find that new place. I'm going to find this new group of people. I'm going to go meet them. That can feel a little bit scary sometimes. We're going to talk about some ways to navigate that part of it. But I think thinking about where can we look to expand the circle is a good starting space. And kind of noticing as you read through some of these, what feels kind of comfortable or more comfortable than not about these different options. So again, I really encourage looking at places where people are trying to meet other people. So looking at things like clubs that are going on, club sports, if that's something you're interested in. We've got lots of UK affiliated sort of programs and groups. So I've got some of those plugged in. There's lots of online opportunities. A couple that I want to kind of point out in particular, Meetup. If you're not familiar with Meetup, there's just a lot of possibility within that to again meet people who are actually wanting to meet other folks. So we got that box checked. And typically it's around a common interest. We're going to hike together, we're going to play board games, we're going to craft, we're going to do whatever. So again, if these are things that you're interested in, maybe not very familiar with, all of these are linked in that last page. So you can go explore those. And even setting small goals for ourselves. I'm going to try one thing this month, or I'm going to check out these things and decide if there's one that I want to pursue a little bit, can be useful in kind of building that competency and comfort with friend building. When we look at this sort of skill building idea, and how we do that, I see a lot of folks who, excuse me, who struggle with some aspect of social anxiety. They may not have a social anxiety disorder, but they may struggle with some feelings of uncomfortableness or social anxiety. That's really common. When we're in new situations, we're being vulnerable, it's really normal for that to bubble up. And I think, kind of reminding ourselves of that is a good starting space. When I try something new, it's going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. That does not mean it's bad. That doesn't mean it's not time for it. It's just, I can expect that. It's like when you buy a new pair of shoes and those new tennis shoes are going to be good for your feet and keep you all in alignment, but those old shoes feel comfortable. I know what it feels like to go home and sit on my couch and read my book and not try something new. So when we try something new, we're going to feel some discomfort. I think if we're feeling a little bit of that anxiety, a couple of things that can help with that on kind of a practical level, thinking about practicing for small talk, and that may sound again like a really um, kind of clunky thing to do, but I think if you know that's an area that you find some discomfort, having a couple of things kind of in your back pocket. What are some things that are interesting to me? If I'm going to try to approach the dog park people, what are a couple of things that I might talk about or interesting things I've seen? Somebody interesting I follow on TikTok that's a dog person, something where we can make that leap from what's the common interest to what am I going to say about this. I do think setting small goals can be useful. So again, if I'm gonna go to the dog park, maybe my goal is I'm gonna talk to one person. I'm just gonna try to strike some conversation up with one person. Maybe my goal isn't we're gonna make plans, but just that's gonna get over that one initial hump. I do this a lot with individual clients who are going to conferences. They want to kind of build their professional network. They feel really nervous about that. Maybe the goal is okay, throughout this conference I'm going to talk to two people. I'm going to make plans with one. So one or two little small goals in there can really be helpful so that you can see that progress. Because it's really easy for folks to get done with, that kind of thing and come back from the dog park and be like, well, I only talked to one person. But if we've sort of set that out from the beginning, if we know, okay, that's going to be a little hard for me, this is going to be how I'm going to try to approach it, then I can feel that win. And that's going to make it a whole lot easier, you all, to do the next thing and to feel like we're making some progress, giving ourselves some patience and grace as we're learning some new skills. Because for some of us, this can feel really uncomfortable. And sometimes I'll hear from folks that they want relationships, whether it's mostly friendships or dating relationships, to kind of come out of a more organic place. I just want that to happen. I want it to just sort of magically sprout. I don't want to have to go seek people out. And I can hear and respect that point of view. I would just challenge that, sometimes we're not given the opportunities to come across bigger circles of folks. In plain language, it is hard for me to make new friends when I'm sitting on my couch reading my book by myself. So if I want something different, I'm going to probably have to step out of that comfort zone a little bit. If this part feels really big or really overwhelming, that might be a good place to come talk to somebody like me or Kim, where we can talk through what are some of those challenges and what are some skills we can start to build to work through that. All right. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that come in as a challenge to our friendships. I'm going to give you all a minute to just look over these because I don't want to read these word for word, but I have some things to say about them. So take a minute and just kind of read through both of these lists. So when I was looking at these two, kind of was trying to kind of summarize and connect back and think about those core values a little bit. For me, that those green flags feel really rooted in kind of respect and authenticity and effort. They all kind of speak to those things that we're able to share. The ones in that red flag group, I'm going to be honest, you all, the word that came to mind is the very super popular social media word of the day, which is toxic. How many times do we hear about toxic people, toxic situations, toxic relationships? And it's fair, it's a fair word to apply. What I think though is, I think sometimes if we just land on toxic as our only way to talk about something, we sort of miss some of the more subtleties of how those things are actually played out in our relationships. I think when we can break out this into a little more kind of red flags and behaviors, they're not respecting my boundaries. This is feeling one-sided. They don't ask me about how I'm doing. It's all about how they're doing. When we can break those down into some specific behaviors, it makes it a little bit easier for us to identify when those things are coming up. When we're not just using these umbrella terms, but we can actually see what in action are those green flags. Why do I feel so good when I'm around this friend or this group of friends? Why do I struggle in this other friendship? In some ways, or looking back at a past friendship maybe that is ended, and you kind of recognize this from some of those past friendships. I think being able just to identify, not we're going to talk about kind of reflecting on past hurts in a minute, but being able to look back and seeking understanding is going to help us understand ourselves and also understand where did some of those relationships get off track a little bit. But I think having a good sense of green and red flags, it's a good tool to kind of take into the next friendship. When we look at things that challenge our friendships, there are, y'all, there's so many. I mean, there's 9 on this page. There's probably, 50 that we could have easily listed out, because anytime we're in relationship with another person, there's all these variables that are making it work or causing those challenges. A couple of these that I want to just say a little bit more about. A lot of these are pretty self-explanatory, and I think again, just important for us to think about the big picture of what could be challenging in those relationships. couple that I want to make a comments about. One is the large friend group dynamics. And don't get me wrong, large groups of friends can be great. I mean, there can be so many great dynamics that are in that, such good support and just really good community we build there. But, as therapists, sometimes we're seeing the parts of life that people struggle a little bit more with. And when we see that, sometimes what we see pop up is some cliques that can kind of happen in really big friend groups. Sometimes there can be kind of a lack of equity where, one person's taking on more burden of some sort, planning or paying or whatever it is, and other friends are maybe not. Some of those dynamics can come up in larger groups, just like they do in larger groups within a family, within a work group. So just being aware of that, if you have the opportunity to be within a large friend group, if you notice some of those dynamics are kind of getting off track again, that might be a place to talk with somebody like me or Kim. But that is also a thing I think to explore a little bit. And I think it's easy when those dynamics get off track a little in those large friend groups to feel like we are the only one who's experiencing that, or that it's just us, or we're out of step with everybody else. And that may or may not be the case. But I just wanted to touch on that one because I think it can be a challenge. Again, they can be great and there can be wonderful things that come from those really big groups of friends, but sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to navigate. Also wanted to mention trauma bonding. I think sometimes we think about trauma bonding, or if you've heard of that phrase before, we think of that in terms of someone who is abusive and the person they've abused. But friends can also fall into this dynamic. So sometimes that will show up, just a couple of specific examples. That can show up if you've both worked in a really abusive workplace together. You've had this trauma bonding experience. We both went through this really hard experience together, and it can be easy for the entire friendship to kind of get built around that, and that we don't have necessarily healthy communication or healthy things and supportive things we're doing with each other. That can also be, maybe we both grew up in abusive homes, and so we had a lot of trauma bonding around those things. So just being aware of that. Again, it's not saying that we can't have friendship when we've experienced trauma, but it just sometimes can come in as an element that we don't necessarily need, or it can cause other issues that we're not necessarily expecting within our friendships. I think it's important to remember that, anytime we're facing a conflict or a challenge within that friendship, our growth is going to happen when we're willing to ask ourselves some of those hard questions too. And that doesn't mean we have to take on all responsibility for all things that are challenging, but it is important for us to think about when we're having conflict, what's my part in this? Am I expecting somebody else to know what I need? Am I communicating my needs in a healthy way? Am I falling into patterns that I don't want to fall into, or that I know are not healthy for me? Really thinking about, what do I want to work on to be a better friend? And again, that doesn't mean that you individually have to take on all responsibility for all conflicts, but most things have elements that both of us share or multiple people share when that's coming up. And so I think reflecting on those kind of questions when we're in the midst of a conflict, or when we notice kind of persistent conflict coming up, can really help us get some insight, and be able to get some better understanding and make some choices in how we want to work through that. When we've got some of those older wounds, or when we've had friendships that have had just painful experiences, and that might mean the friendship is still existing, but it's got some painful experiences. It might mean that the friendship ended, at some point. When we've got some of those older wounds, sometimes we're carrying those with us, and we want to be aware of that. I think, it's important to know when we've had some, betrayal or fracture in our friendship, it often is going to cause a disruption of trust, and not just trust for other people. I think a lot of us kind of recognize that. Okay, I let this person in and they hurt me. Am I going to be willing to let another person in? But I also see a lot of just doubting ourselves, doubting our own ability to kind of see what was going on, or doubting our ability to communicate effectively or set boundaries. And so it can really bring up some of those questions when we've had a friendship that didn't go well. And so taking a little bit of time, I think we hear about that, we think about that maybe more in the realm of dating relationships, but I think the same elements kind of come up, or same aspects of it come up in friendships. We don't want to bring that baggage into a new friendship. We want to be able to look back on what went wrong in that friendship, really with that purpose of seeking understanding, getting a deeper understanding, not placing blame, but how do I understand myself more? How do I understand what went on a little bit more, so that I don't carry that baggage into that next friendship, and also that I've got some wisdom to draw from, as I'm navigating my next challenges. I think a couple of particular ways friendships can end are painful. When folks are ghosted, again, I think we hear about that a lot more in relation to dating, but this comes up in friendships a lot, and it bleeds off into a lot of confusion and self-doubt. And so sometimes being able to approach that situation, if that's happened to you, with this concept of radical acceptance. And I put an article in the resource page about radical acceptance because I think it's a really useful tool. But being able to kind of accept the reality of a situation doesn't mean we like it or agree with it, but we want to be able to move on from it. We don't want to stay kind of stuck in that. Being able to move on when we've not had that closure can be a little bit of a challenge. I think, if we start to see some of those bigger themes, if we sort of notice, yeah, this is maybe the second or third friend I'm kind of having this issue come up with, looking at those questions for us, what's going on for me? Is there some work that I need to do on myself? Looking at those themes and patterns. And again, I think this is a place to really come back and connect to some of those core values and sort of that bigger vision of the kind of friend we want to be. Trying to take another perspective about what's going on. Getting insight. Therapy may be a place to do that. Then might also come through self work, like journaling or talking to other friends or family. People that can help you get some insight or understanding, and really trying to have self compassion as part of that. And I think when we know that we have played a part in hurting other people or letting people down that we care about, really trying to focus in on what we can learn from those past mistakes or missteps. Identifying what we want to do differently, being aware of how easy it is to fall into that spiral of, I'm not a good person, I'm the problem, I'm bad in some way, and really looking more toward how do I grow through this? What do I want to grow and develop? And really examining how that connects to those core values. All right, I'm going to switch over to Kim and let her talk to you about communication for a little bit, and I'll be back.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Rhonda said earlier, I'm Kim Relaford, and one of the therapists here also at Work Life Connections. So throughout this 4-part series, we have offered some communication tools. All of them apply to any kind of relationship, and we really honed in on our first session with family relationships. We talked about practicing the pause and the ask guest culture. So today, what we want to focus on is more talking about active and reflective listening. So could you go ahead and change to the next slide? Okay. So active and reflective listening is one of those micro skills that we can learn that helps us to be a better communicator overall, regardless of the conversation or the relationship. But also what it is it allows us to say it signals to our friend that what they're saying is that we're really listening to them. We're paying attention to what they're saying. And so why is that important? So whether it is a regular conversation or one that has conflict in it, it helps us to understand other points of view. It also helps us calm emotional distress. When our friend is upset or talking about something that's really emotionally charged for them, when we're using these active or reflective listening skills, it allows them to feel listened to, and it helps them to kind of regulate down. It develops positive relationships. Even when meeting new people, it allows us to have that opportunity to show that we're interested in them and that we're listening. And it also allows us to focus on providing emotional support instead of offering opinions and solutions. So, when we are more focused on providing opinions and solutions instead of listening to what they have to say, we tend to interrupt more. We might be more judgmental about things. We want to jump to advice instead of truly just listening and allowing them to be heard. So there are two things here: active listening and reflective listening. With active listening, you're looking at 2 different ways to do that. There are verbal ways to provide active listening, and there's nonverbal ways to provide active listening. So verbal encouragers. So that's what you're doing when you're actively listening. What you're doing is you're encouraging them to continue saying what they're saying. You're encouraging them to see that you're engaged in the conversations. So a verbal encourager can be something just short as going, oh, I see. Oh, just those kind of comments that are like, I am listening to you. I am paying attention. It can also be something that's using a keyword. So a keyword encourager is when we pick up a theme of the conversation, like, they might say something like, I am really struggling right now with getting everything done in my life. I have too many things going on. And you're saying, yeah, that does sound like a struggle. You going back to that word that they used to allows them to understand that you really are paying attention and attending to what they are saying. The other way is to reset statement of, it's a longer verbal encourager. And that's when you use the exact same words that they use. So they might say to you, the clerk at that store wasn't getting it, and I thought I was going to lose it. Yeah, it does sound like that clerk wasn't getting it, and I would have probably felt like I was going to lose it too. You're almost saying exactly the same words back to them. It encourages them to continue on with their conversation and shows that you're listening. Nonverbal encouragers include things like nodding your head, leaning into them, putting your phone down, because we love holding onto our phones these days. So putting that phone down, it is actually an encourager that says, I am paying attention to you. It could be the way that your face looks, appropriate facial expressions, being open, maybe using gestures to show that you're engaged in their conversation. These are things that you can do that allows them to feel heard as well, but also shows that you're being patient. You're allowing them to roll out the conversation, say what they need to say, and you're showing that you're paying attention. You want to pepper these encouragers into communication. So if you are going, yeah, I bet that is hard. Wow. That is like, after a while, that's an autopilot, and it's almost as bad as having your phone in their hand while you're talking, because all you're saying is that I'm listening to you, but really I'm just making you think I'm listening to you. You want to be genuine in those and just put in those and not overdo it. So the other part of this we're talking about today is reflective listening. In reflective listening, you're looking at two skills. One is paraphrasing and one is summarizing. So in paraphrasing, you might start your response with words like, so you feel, it sounds like you're wondering if you really want to go on this trip with your friend. It could be something like that. You might be asking open-ended questions, such as saying things like, tell me more about that. It sounds like you're really struggling right now. Is there something you want to talk about? If you just say, are you okay? That's a yes or no answer, right? But if I ask you, you seem like you're a little out of today. What's going on with you? Something you want to talk about? That opens up that idea that I just don't want a yes or no answer. I'm inviting you to tell me more. So the second part of either paraphrasing or summarizing is to check things out. So I'm going to say I might rephrase something they said, like, you're wondering if you really want to go on this trip. Is that what I'm hearing you say? You want to check it out because you don't want to assume it. Because if I said, you feel angry about this, so that might not be what they're feeling at all. Maybe they're feeling really, really hurt and sad about what's going on. So instead he says, it sounds like you really feel angry about this. Tell me more about that. And is that what I am hearing? Is it anger that's going on with you? You want to make sure that you check that out with them. In summarizing, you're reviewing all or part of a conversation. Summarizing is really useful when there's a conflictual conversation about something that's kind of painful, or a boundary's been violated, or you feel like there's a conflict that you're addressing. It encompasses and clearly indicates you understood the content of the whole conversation. You're acknowledging feelings, and it concludes with how you might avoid any further misunderstanding. So I might say, my friend comes to me and they're upset because they feel like I'm not as responsive as I should be with their text. So I might say something like, I heard you when you said not responding to your text felt like I was pulling away or ignoring you, and you need me to be more responsive. Even if it's to just say back quickly, I got this text, or I'll get back to you later. Just something to let me know that you got my text and that you know that you're paying attention. It also is good to kind of end with what you need as well. And I need you to give me the benefit of the doubt when I don't immediately text you back, that maybe I couldn't text you back and that I will as soon as I can. Does that sound good? Does that sound like a good plan for us to move forward with this? Because you're showing that I value this relationship and I want to have a resolution to it. So both active and reflective listening can improve communication with anyone or any relationship. And there are several tools. If you do a quick Google search, if you just Google search active and reflective listening, so many articles, so many tips on this. And so it will help you to kind of develop these skills and hone them, because they will serve you well in any relationship. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'm going to switch and talk a little bit more about boundaries. So we talked about communication skills. We're talking about those in all of these sessions. We're also going to touch on boundaries. Today, we're talking more about boundaries with friendships. But again, these things we're talking about apply to all types of relationships. So I love this quote. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others, because that is one of the times we want to be kind and we want to get along, and so we may allow a boundary violation over and over again, or we may not be clear what our boundaries are. We have to sometimes verbalize those boundaries for people to know where they are. We have to be willing to take that risk. I find that when I need to set a boundary, I can tell when I need to set a boundary is when someone's words or actions cause me pain or anger or sadness. And then I'll kind of do a check-in. I'll be like, so I'm struggling with this. So what is the boundary that I feel is violated, or where do I need to put one in place? And again, back to that ideal vulnerability, I have to be willing to ask for what I need. I have to have the courage to love myself enough, even if it might disappoint my friend, short term or long term. I need to set this boundary. Go ahead to the next slide. So let's review what boundaries are. So personal boundaries are the limits and rules we set for ourselves within a relationship. So boundaries are guidelines for acceptable behavior, expectations, and personal limits. So there are different types of and kinds of boundaries, and we're going to talk more about these here in a minute. So I'm not going to talk about them right now. But the purpose of boundaries is to create trust and safety. It helps us be close to each other, because when I can trust you to say, oh, I'm not comfortable with this, then you can also trust me with saying that as well. So it helps us to bring us closer. It helps us to understand the parameters. It also avoids resentment and distress. When something makes me angry or makes me or hurts my feelings, and I don't address it, what can happen is that it will continue, and then I become more resentful. So not only am I hurt and angry, I'm also now resentful of what's going on, because they should know what I need. And people cannot read your mind. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we all make, is we think people should just know what we need. And we have to ask for that. It also promotes self-care and increases our confidence. The more comfortable we are with setting boundaries, it actually helps us to increase how good we feel about ourselves. It's also a way that we show self-compassion, that we love ourselves and we're going to take care of ourselves in these situations. And it allows us to keep hold of our and maintain personal integrity too. So these are some examples of how to set boundaries. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about these here in a moment, but we want to get clarity on what we need. So again, that what I said about, like, when I feel like the boundary's been violated, or I'm finding there might need to be a boundary, I'm going to go ahead and think about what it is that I feel like is making me uncomfortable. And then I'm going to think about how I'm going to say it. And I'm not going to beat around the bush, because that is a good way for people to misunderstand what you're trying to tell them. It would be nice if I would wish you would, like, things that are like caveats that are not, that are, when we think about apologizing, I'm really sorry to ask you to do this, but could you? We're apologizing, we're justifying. That gives wiggle room around our boundaries. So we need to be very calm, keep our emotions in check, and just very specifically say, this is what I need. We also want to avoid making personal or punitive by making ultimatums. So it would be really easy when we're feeling emotional about setting boundary to say, if you do this again, I am not going to speak to you, or this is going to happen, because ultimatums are sometimes hard to keep, and sometimes they don't apply, because some boundaries can be fluid, that in different relationships we might have different boundaries, and so ultimatums are not going to get us where we need to be. And when we're not sure how to set that boundary, a good way to start is to use our support system, run things by them, come talk to one of us about it. Just like, how can I script this? How can I say this in a way that's clear, but is kind but necessary? Go ahead, Ron, to the next one. Okay, so let's bring this home by talking about some scenarios that may need a boundary conversation. So this first one, a good friend insists that you reserve a weekend getaway for both of you, although you're too busy to travel. So sometimes a boundary can accompany an alternative suggestion. So I might say something like, I really want to spend time with you too, but I simply don't have the time right now for a weekend getaway. Could we plan some time together that doesn't include traveling? And I would love for us to do that. So you can set the boundary as, I can't do this amount of time, but I do want to spend time with you. A childhood friend is often rude to you in front of others, but you don't want to make a fuss. but it's bothering you. And the discomfort of not saying something, it can actually eat away to you and can actually start feeling like resentment and anger. And so you start avoiding your friend. And this friend is a childhood friend that's been there for a long time. They may not know that what they're saying is rude. They might think that you're in on the joke if they're making a joke. And so I always say you can choose comfort or you can choose courage, but you can't choose both. It's another Brene Brown uh, quote. Both Ron and I like those. So one way to start the conversation might be to acknowledge how difficult or uncomfortable it makes you feel. I feel really uncomfortable having to bring this up because I know that it's happened a couple of times and I haven't said anything. But when we're with your other friends and you make that joke about something that I did when I was a kid, it kind of it feels bad to me. I'd really rather you didn't say things like that, make jokes about things like that when we're in front of others, or just check it out with me first before you do that. And your friend might be like, I didn't know that even bothered you. So if you don't let them know, how are they going to change it? So the other part of that is also to start off with the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they don't know that what they're doing is hurting your feelings. So you want to give them permission to say, oh, I am so sorry. I didn't realize that was hurting you. And then you can move forward from there. Another one is a work friend vents obsessively and needs emotional support day and night after their recent romantic breakup. We've all been there. Like that is a really hard time. People are really struggling. They have so many things that they're trying to work through when a relationship breaks up, but you might feel guilty if you don't make yourself available to them. So you find yourself over and over giving them more time and attention that you have to spare to talk about the romantic breakup because you don't want to leave them hanging. But a little bit of guilt is better than a lifetime of resentment. And when they start eroding all of your time up, talking over and over again about the same thing, you're going to start resenting that and you're going to start pulling away from them. So it's okay to be less available. Like, not answering their phone call the first time that, every time they call, or, saying, oh, I'm sorry, let's talk about this later, but right now I have to get this report done. You can make yourself less available. Another one here is your best friend disrespects your values or beliefs, and you've never spoken up about this before. This goes back to the idea that if people don't know what our boundaries are, they can't honor them. And so it might be that you need to make it real clear. I know we don't completely agree on this issue, but I do respect your beliefs and values, and I need you to respect mine as well. I feel like this needs to be a conversation that we don't have together and that we just agree to disagree on. Okay, Rhonda, next one. So I told you that we were going to talk about these types of boundaries, and I like that we gave you examples of all of these types of boundaries and examples of how to set boundaries in or around these types of boundaries. So this first one is time. So again, back to our friend who is using up a lot of our time. You might say, I'm glad we're here together for dinner, but I'm going to have to leave at 6 o'clock, or I don't have time for that today. Can we talk when we get back together on Wednesday or Friday? These are time boundaries that we're placing. Our time is valuable. We want to give them some of it, but maybe we don't have all of it to give them. It might be a material boundary where it's our personal belongings, the things that belong to us, and that we get to decide whether or not we let people use them or borrow them. I'm not able to let people borrow my car right now. Physical is about your own personal body and space. I have a peanut allergy, so please don't bring food with peanuts to the potluck. Or might have a friend that really loves hugging, but that's not who you are. So you say, let's just handshake. Can we just handshake instead of hug? Emotional ones might be movies on the topic that are tough to watch. An example of this for me is book club. So we all take turns picking a book, and it's that person's choice, and I respect their choice. But I might say something like, "Oh, I know this book has a lot of animal cruelty in it, so I'm not going to read the book. I just want you to know that. But I am going to come to book club, and because I might enjoy our conversations around that, and I really want to spend time with you all. So my boundary is not to say you can't read that book for book club. My boundary is I'm not going to read that book. Another one is intellectual. That's going back to this is right for me, but wrong for you. In that our choices might be different. And then sexual. I'm not comfortable talking about my sex life, or I only talk about my sex life within a small group, or I feel like maybe when I talk about something about my sex life, I'm revealing someone else's information, right? So our sex life usually includes another person. And so when we are talking about our sex life, we're not holding boundaries and space for their trust as well. So it's okay to set that boundary here. Okay. So again, these are some specific examples of that. Go ahead, Ron. I'm sorry. Here's some examples of direct boundaries. And I want you to notice that almost all of these, or well, all of these have an I statement in them. I statements are the way that we can set a clear boundary without beating around the bush, and they are about me. I don't want to read that book, but I do want to participate in book club. So that's about me. You're my best friend, but I have to say no. This feels wrong to me. I need to respect that. Another one here at the bottom is I need to tell you that I can't talk about our other friend anymore because I feel guilty. I find that sometimes it can be really easy with some friends when you've like vented to them about something, then it becomes like almost autopilot. We've said this before. We don't need to say it again. I feel like, there's no, we're not gonna talk about this anymore because I feel guilty about it, because now it's not about me getting the emotional support I need, but it's about me gossiping, and I just feel guilty. So I want to take this conversation off the table. Sometimes these are examples of direct boundaries. Sometimes boundaries are also indirect, and they don't have to be spoken. Sometimes they are about withdrawing a little bit. Maybe I have a group of friends where there's three of us, and two of my friends have more like more things that they talk about in common sometimes. And so they might monopolize the conversation, and I might feel a little left out. So if this continues to happen, I have a couple of choices. I might decide that I'm going to spend one-on-one time with them, or I might even invite a fourth person when we get together, so that that I don't feel that kind of feeling of left out, because they're not doing anything wrong, and I don't need to maybe not feel like I need to say anything about it because I don't think they're being intentionally cruel, but I'm going to take care of myself in that situation. So sometimes they're just things that we do to change our behavior. They're not necessarily something that we speak out loud. Okay, go ahead, Rhonda. Okay, so let's end our conversation today with talking about when friendships end. And I think that I always talk to clients about how friendships can be seasonal. They can be during a certain season of our life. Like we might become really close to our friends during college, and some of them might become longer term friends into the other chapters and seasons of our lives, but some of them might have been friends in that moment in time. And you shared a special bond, but you might grow distant for over time because of different like chapters, or even unresolved conflict or divergent growth. And divergent growth is kind of like when we outgrow them in our ideals or needs or things that we're interested in, or that they might even outgrow us. Their career takes off, but ours hasn't quite done that yet. Or our career takes off, and we feel like we have different priorities. Our priorities might change over time. So, thinking about that. So one example again might be a friend advances quickly in their career while the other one is stagnating at home. Our professional social circles may change. Like I might be a friend part of a sorority, but that my other friend is not. And as I grow out of college and I continue to participate in my sorority, they may not feel like they're included in that as much as they were when we were roommates or friends. So those things can happen, and we might have different physical, intellectual, or socially grown apart at that point. Sometimes friendships can be broken long before we give ourselves permission to end them. And it's okay to let go while acknowledging how important that friend was during a specific season of our life. Just because our friendship didn't last doesn't mean they weren't important in that point in our life. And so we can honor that part of it, but while letting go and moving forward in our lives. Okay, on to the next page. Okay. So what do you do when you're processing the end of a friendship? So it's not a sign of failure when friends end. And again, it's okay to let it go. So you may need sometimes when it's a friendship has ended abruptly, like there's been something that's been hurtful or harmful, or that the friend is completely pulled away and you're not sure why. Back to what Rhonda talked about with ghosting, it's really important to allow yourself to time to process and grieve. Giving yourself, again, what I said about reflecting on your role in the relationship and what's changed, making peace with maybe never knowing, back to that radical acceptance idea, making peace without ever knowing why a friendship ended, or, again, making peace with the fact that this was a time in my life and that person was really important to me. And I'm going to honor that, even though it's not true in my life today. Explore what fears you have related to repeating that pattern in new relationships. When relationships end, we kind of want to rehash and figure out what went wrong, and that what we're afraid we might take into, again, that next relationship. And then looking back to seek understanding, not blame. Like, what can I do differently in other relationships? What is my part in the relationship ending? What is their part in the relationship ending? So that I can understand that. And it's not about blaming and shaming myself, but about letting go by seeking understanding and not taking that forward into my life. Okay, Rhonda. So again, we talked about this earlier, but what do we do when friendships end? Because sometimes they leave such a gap in our life that we will experience a lot of loneliness. And this is going back to what can you do? We talked about volunteering, joining a class or club, but also spending time alone, spending time in nature, going back to learning to be your own friend and spending time on things that you enjoy. Maybe playing multiplayer games online. Like, a lot of our lives these days are virtual, and that includes a lot of video gaming. A lot of people, that this is their social outlet. They play games online, they talk to each other as friends. So you might go to your multiplayer games group and spend more time with them. Practicing self-care, again, becoming our own friend. And then spending time with pets and animals. That's the best part about our little furry friends, is that they can bring us some real peace, and we can get that unconditional love from them. And then finally, if you're still struggling with managing your loneliness, talking to a therapist. Okay. You want to go take us home, Rhonda?
Sorry, forgot I was muted there for a second.
Mhm.
So y'all, I know that was a lot to pack into an hour. Like, I know we touched on a lot of different aspects of this. This is the resource page. So I told you there was a bunch of them. You will be getting this. So this will get emailed out to you most likely tomorrow. But all of these links will be live if you want to explore those a little bit more. Lots of articles, but then also some of those online communities, as well as there's a podcast that I come across, that Brene Brown activity. So just a variety of the stuff that we touched on today is linked within here. I would definitely encourage you, if some of this resonates for you, and, it may not be that every part is what you're kind of dealing with. Maybe you're thinking about making new friends, or maybe you're struggling with an old friendship that didn't kind of succeed. And so take the parts that you want to explore more, read a little bit. We try to really plug in a lot of questions for reflection throughout the program. So there's 2 or 3 different places where those are listed. I would really encourage you just to spend some time with those. Give yourself some time, go for a good walk and think about a couple of those questions and reflect some. Or if you're a writer, journal a little bit about it. Again, we've mentioned coming in for services with us if that's something you're interested in. This is our team. So there are 4 full-time therapists within the health and wellness group. We've got some other contract therapists as well. If you go to our page, you'll be able to see that. But these are our 4 main folks. So it's me and Kim, and then Ann and Eric. And then there is our page to learn a little bit more about what we do in terms of our services. So just kind of my very short summary of that part. In terms of therapy services, all employees as well as sponsored dependents are eligible for 5 visits through our office, and that renews every fiscal year. So every July 1, you've got those 5 visits if you need that. If some of this resonates in a way that you're like, yeah, I'd like to maybe talk through this thing, or think about how to deal with that social anxiety, or whatever piece is coming up, come in for a couple sessions with us. Like, that's why we're here. And it's a relatively easy sort of program to step into. The QR code that's there will take you to our page. You can also just kind of Google UKY therapy employees, and that'll get you there. We've also got, though, within health and wellness, there's other resources in terms of health coaches and the nutritionists, all sort of different health and wellness resources that are listed over on the right, our elder care resources that are available, the Working Parents Network, and then also the IRAF Clinic. I took those completely out of order, but you all get where I'm going with that. check out the services if you're interested. I think that's one of those benefits. I'm not here to sell UK's benefits and services, but it's one of those things we know. We've got some opportunities and resources that are available, easily accessible. Tap into those, whether that's therapy, whether that's other wellness, whether that's just exploring some of these pieces to meet new people. There's a lot of resources that are available. And I think, we have that option. We don't want to forget UK as a resource as well. All right, Kim, anything you want to add before we wrap up for today? I'm going to switch to the next one. Sorry, I asked you that, and then I keep talking. Our next session is in 2 weeks, February 6th. We're going to be doing part 3 of our relationship series. So there's 4 parts total. Next time, we're going to be talking about romantic partners. And then 2 weeks after that, we will be talking about work and colleague relationships. So we would love to have you all join us. Again, you're going to hear similar themes, but different content within each of those. They will be posted online, and then you all will be getting the slide deck from us tomorrow. And now, on that note, Kim, anything else you want to add before I wrap us up for the day?
No, I was going to say that with the health and wellness, the health coaches, that would be a good friendships would be a good topic, and goal setting with them. They are really good. They will talk. They will help you set some goals around that, and even do some accountability coaching with you.
Hmm.
So we could do some of that, but they're going to be much more accessible on that, and it's a great way and use of their time. And then I just want to say thank you all for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you all very much. This is a series that Kim and I really love. We're glad to have you all here and hope that you all will come back and join us in 2 weeks and in 4 weeks. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.